Welcome to the deep dive. We take the sources you send us and we dig in to give you some targeted insights. Today, we're kind of pulling back the curtain on something pretty appealing on the surface: extended stays in Southeast Asia. You know the picture, right? Vibrant cities, amazing beaches, maybe a lower cost of living. It draws in business travelers, digital nomads, entrepreneurs. But we're not talking about a quick holiday. We're really focusing on the long haul. Those extended work assignments, maybe setting up a corporate base for years, moving past that initial, honeymoon phase.
Right. And our goal today, especially for you, the learner, maybe if you're thinking about this yourself, we manage teams out in the Asia Pacific. Well, it's crucial. We're trying to look past the glossy photos, the glamour and idyllic imagery, as one source put it, to really get at the complexity when you're there for months or even years. We know lots of professionals use those flexible extended stay options like service departments. They promise convenience, right? A home away from home. But what the source is showing us is that even with good support, there's this hidden layer of stress. We're talking surprisingly high burnout, real social isolation, and this sort of constant background hum of bureaucratic drain. That's the context we need to explore.
Absolutely. The documents we looked at were, well, strikingly consistent on this. The big challenge often isn't the job itself. It's the everyday stuff, the scaffolding around your life, and the anxiety, the exhaustion they described. It's not just small annoyances. Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with something that feels a bit counterintuitive.
Hmm.
The social scene. Yeah, if you just scroll through social media, expat life looks like one big party, doesn't it? Endless networking, new friends every week. But our sources paint a lone lore picture, actually. They describe the social connections as often being more fleeting than they seem. Which leads surprisingly to this really deep sense of isolation for many people, even when they're constantly meeting new faces.
And what's really interesting there is why. It boils down to the transient nature of that whole global expat world. People are often on fixed contracts,
Yeah.
maybe 18 months, 2 years, something like that. So just when you feel like you're building a real connection, maybe a proper friendship, poof, they're off to the next posting or they head back home. It makes building a stable, reliable support network incredibly hard work.
So it's not that there's no socializing happening, it's more about the depth. It doesn't stick.
Precisely. You're having conversations all the time, sure, but they tend to stay pretty surface level. You know the drill. Where are you from? What do you do? How long are you here for? It's constant but shallow. There's rarely that shared history or that feeling of long-term commitment you get back home. And one source pointed out, this means your emotional support system can be really fragile or just not there right when you actually need it, like a family crisis back home or, a big problem at work. You're physically there in this exciting place, but emotionally you feel kind of adrift.
Rootless.
That feeling of being rootless, that connects to something the source is called identity drift. And this is where it gets really fascinating, I think, because the struggle becomes internal. You've left behind your familiar roles, right? The job title meant something specific back home, the community that knew you, even just your daily routines. And losing that fixed sense of self, well, the sources say it's overwhelmingly common. Oh, absolutely. And the emotional toll, it's significant. I mean, at first, it's exciting, new place, new experiences, maybe freedom from old expectations. It can feel like a real adventure, like a vacation from your old identity almost.
Yeah, a fresh start.
But that initial buzz, it fades. And what's left is often this profound sense of, well, rootlessness. Like we said, you're juggling, trying to figure out all the new rules, social cues, cultural norms, practical stuff, while also, trying desperately to keep your connections back home alive and relevant.
So you end up sort of stuck in the middle, not quite belonging to your old world anymore, but not really fitting into the new one either.
Exactly that. And it often comes out as this deep confusion, like, where do I actually fit in now? What's my purpose here, really? Especially if, say, your identity back home was tied up in being really competent, knowing how things work. Suddenly you're the newcomer, maybe struggling with the language, basic logistics. It could feel like a real knock to your confidence, even if your job title is the same. That's that internal cost of the external instability, you see. Okay, so if we take that emotional rootlessness, that instability, and then we layer on the sheer logistics you have to deal with every day, the legal stuff, the practicalities, you start to see how the energy drain really ramps up. Let's talk about that low-grade constant anxiety, what the source is called visa anxiety and bureaucratic stress. This hits professionals on long assignments particularly hard.
Yeah, what struck me was how universal this seems to be. Across different countries in the region, the sources detailed this constant wrestling match with complex visa rules. And it's not usually a one-time thing, is it? It's often frequent renewals, processes that aren't always clear or standardized. It's ongoing maintenance of your legal status.
Which creates this background noise of anxiety, constantly. You're always sort of half aware of the risk. What if I miss a deadline? What if a document isn't right? Could my whole life here be suddenly upended? You end up spending so much mental energy just planning ahead, making sure you're legally okay. And that's energy not going into your job or your life. Think about a corporate team lead. That's potentially hours and hours of their focus or their team's focus, getting sucked into managing government appointments, finding translators, just prepping paperwork. It's a real hidden cost.
And that energy drain gets worse, doesn't it, when you look at the everyday realities, the things that just grind you down day to day that are so different from the vacation vibe.
Absolutely. It's the basic infrastructure stuff we take for granted at home. Banking, transport, utilities. We expect them to be smooth, predictable.
Yeah.
In many parts of Southeast Asia, these systems just work differently. They often need more effort from you, operate on different schedules. Take banking, for instance. Just opening an account as a temporary resident, even a highly paid professional on assignment. It can turn into this multi-day saga. Endless forms, language barriers, maybe unexpected requirements.
Right. Even if you're a nice service department that sorts out the housing, you still have to navigate the local sisters for everything else. Money, transport.
Exactly. The service department solves one piece, but not the whole puzzle of daily life integration.
And what about the physical side? The sources mention things like the climate, the living space itself, contributing to fatigue.
Yes, definitely. Beyond the paperwork, there's the sheer physical effort of adapting. The heat, the humidity in many places. It just takes energy to constantly adjust. And then limitations within the accommodation itself. While those service places are great for shorter stays, someone there for a year or two might find, well, daily conveniences aren't quite up to what they're used to. Maybe simple things like cooking a proper family meal become a challenge if the kitchen setup is basic. And it's the accumulation, isn't it? A frustrating bank visit, then a delayed delivery. Maybe the internet in the complex is unreliable that day. It's this pileup of small hurdles. That adds up to real mental fatigue. It increases the risk of burnout significantly. It really is like death by 1,000 small paper cuts.
That idea of compounding fatigue, it brings us nicely to another tension the sources highlighted: privilege, integration, and local dynamics. Connecting this to the bigger picture, it seems like the higher incomes expats often have, the very thing that allows for a comfortable lifestyle. It can also accidentally create this big social and cultural gap.
Yeah, the sources really pointed to this. Many expats, perhaps unintentionally, end up living in a kind of privileged bubble. They might hire local help for cooking or cleaning or childcare, which is obviously convenient, but it also means they have less organic day-to-day interaction with the local community on an equal footing. And often there isn't that pressing need to learn the local language fluently or really get deep into local customs because they can function okay within their bubble.
So they're living in the place, but not really of the place, socially kind of separate.
That's a good way to put it. And this separation, it creates tensions, both conscious and unconscious. The local community might see expats as temporary, wealthy, separate, which just reinforces those feelings of otherness we talked about earlier. For the expat, too, you're not truly integrated, which then kind of paradoxically feeds back into that identity drift and makes it harder to build that genuine local support network. Real integration takes deliberate effort. It goes beyond just showing up for work.
And this lack of integration, the stress, it leads us right into the hidden burden, burnout and mental health. Because despite the dream lifestyle images, the sources are clear. Expats in Southeast Asia report much higher rates of stress and burnout than locals, and it's not just typical work stress, is it?
No, it's driven by factors really specific to that expat situation. First, that isolation we keep mentioning. There's often no easy, readily available social safety net when things get tough. Second, homesickness. It's not just a brief pang. It can be this continuous low-level drain on your emotional resources. And third, finding good mental health care. That's a huge challenge. Finding a therapist who speaks your language, who understands the specific pressures of being an expat, it can be incredibly difficult or expensive or just geographically impossible in some places.
I remember one source mentioning something about workplace culture too, like Western expats being unprepared for local expectations around presenteeism in some Asian business cultures. They might expect flexible hours like back home, but find themselves working incredibly long, intense days without that usual release valve of friends and family nearby.
That's absolutely a factor. The work-life balance struggles combined with that daily grind of just managing life, the bureaucracy, the logistics, it makes burnout almost feel, well, inevitable unless you actively work
Definitely.
against it. The equation just doesn't balance easily.
And this is really important. There's a hopeful note in the data, too. Despite all these challenges piling up, the admin nightmares, the rootlessness, the isolation, many expats show incredible adaptability, resilience. They basically have to develop really unique, effective coping skills just to navigate the complexity of it all. So what does all this mean? For you, the listener, maybe planning that move or managing that team assignment. Hashtag summary and conclusion.
Well, I think it means we absolutely have to move beyond the Instagram version towards more honest conversations. Just acknowledging the full picture, the good, the bad, the stressful, it's essential. It helps shape healthier, more realistic expectations before anyone even gets on the plane. You need to go in prepared for a marathon, not a sprint, right? Understanding the specific things that are likely to chip away at your reserves, emotionally and mentally.
Exactly. Knowing about these complexities up front, the bureaucratic drain, the potential for feeling rootless, the hidden stress that lets you approach an extended stay with your eyes wide open. If you know, for example, that just relying on the transient expat social scene might not be enough long term, maybe you can be more proactive. Prioritize learning some local language right away, consciously work on building deeper connections, maybe join local interest groups rather than just hoping for easy camaraderie.
And for professionals using those service departments, let's say, for longer stays, it's vital to recognize the limits of that convenience. Sure, the housing is sorted, fantastic. But the integration challenges, the bureaucracy, building a real social life that's still squarely on your shoulders, it requires personal effort.
Which does raise a really important question, doesn't it?
Yeah. Given that we know expats often develop this high resilience because they have to cope with chronic stress,
Yeah.
we need to think beyond just telling individuals to be resilient. What specific measurable structures, not just vague advice like make local friends or use the employee assistance program, what concrete things could an individual, or maybe more importantly a corporation, put in place before someone arrives? Things to actively counteract the bureaucratic friction and the social fragility the sources describe so clearly. Should companies maybe pre-hire local fixers specifically for visa and banking hurdles? Should language training be mandatory before the contract even starts, not just an optional extra?
That feels like the real challenge moving forward. How do we shift resilience from being a necessary survival trait for the individual to something that's systematically supported? Whether you're just trying to smooth out the logistics of your next business trip, or grappling with your visa renewal, or planning a major move, understanding these hidden burdens is probably your most powerful tool. Thanks for diving deep into the sources with us again today. Until next time, keep exploring.